Our friend from Consumer is back. Evan's here talking about Wi-Fi, Surfboard Max, the features and technology that's in it. Evan's an amazing individual, and he has an awesome team that he's working with that develops and builds amazing products for the home use. And of course, a lot of this is kind of centered around the COVID discussion because of how much people are at home. But the one thing to take away from this is that this is technology that's going to be there before, during, and after, and they're always doing everything they can to improve it, make it better. World-class internet in your house, thanks to Evan and his team. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy. And we're rolling. Evan, welcome back. It's good to have you.
Matt, thanks so much for having me back. I'm not sure if it's because you were concerned I've been in my basement so much or, the last podcast went so well. So thanks for having me back, though.
Just so we're clear, the same rules apply. I don't know if anybody can hear me, but if you need help, blink twice.
No, I just want to assure you that I took your advice. I have actually visited other rooms in my house during the day, which is good. I'm still putting on nice clothes, once in a while. I have, as much as I've wanted to, I have not put on my my Baby Yoda sweatpants. I have not done that. Don't judge me, Matt.
Actually, I am going to judge it, but it's kind of a judgment of disappointment. I mean, if there's ever a time when you could wear Baby Yoda sweatpants to work, this would absolutely be it.
That's true. That's probably true.
So I know the last podcast, we talked about a lot of things, and it was an awesome conversation. And so, it's funny. I keep thinking about this. We have people in the world that do marketing, right? And they'll phrase things like, we rely on our home Wi-Fi now more than ever, when the reality is somebody forced us to stay home.
Unprecedented times.
Exactly. And so when we look at this, you're in a really unique position because it's really flipped a lot of things on its head, right? Like normally you go to work and...
Yeah, it definitely has. And I don't know if unique or I've become the IT specialist for people. It's actually ironic we're talking, right now, because it was probably, it was almost a year ago today when, maybe just a couple more days, but it was a year ago today when things basically started really locking down, in terms of the U.S. because of COVID. And it definitely did start, some interesting times. And, putting all the terrible things of, COVID aside, what that drove was a lot of interesting things that were happening in the home. So I guess the most interesting one was a friend of mine, Steve. He gave me a call and he was like, you got to help me. You got to help me. My house is a mess. My family's a mess. I need your help. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm qualified to doing that type of counseling. And he's like, no, I've got some technology issues. Like, okay, all right. Okay. Just checking. But what he said to me was actually kind of interesting, for me, because, being in technology, I was fascinated with his perception of some of the problems that he was facing in his home. And it all had to do with, kind of, now he has 3 kids. They're all home. They were all doing, trying to do, web chats. He was trying to work. His wife was trying to work, and it was creating, basically havoc within the home. And so he proceeded to rant for probably like a half hour, explaining to me his problems of, what he was thinking. And I just asked him some casual questions just to understand about what his perceptions were. And he was telling me about that his son, his one laptop, wasn't working. So he went out immediately because he couldn't, have a good experience at school, get his son, kind of a new computer to be able to do that. And he's like, it's still not solving the problem. And then he proceeded to went around as he actually upgraded a lot of his technology. And so after a while, I explained to him, I said, Steve, let me try to explain to you this way. I said, imagine your house is a network of roads. Just imagine it's a network of roads that go through your house to take information back and forth to all those different devices. And what you've done is you've went out and you bought a Ferrari. And now you're trying to use that Ferrari. And meanwhile, running through your whole home is these small little dirt roads. how's it working out for you?
Such a great analogy.
and he's like, yeah, but it's a great computer. It's a great. I said, yeah, it's phenomenal. It's awesome. I'm sure it's you love sitting in it. You love, the radio's great. I'm sure it's awesome. You're having a great experience, but it's not working out very well for you. And he's like, no. And I said, okay. So did you ever think about maybe you're not putting in the right roads? Maybe you got to upgrade, some of the infrastructure. I mean, people think about this all the time when they do, remodels on their houses, and they upgrade, a lot of things in their home, upgrade the bathrooms, upgrade, plumbing, but they don't think about in terms of upgrading their networks. And they don't realize that it really is, in a lot of cases, people working or trying to use these little dirt roads that are going through their house.
Yeah.
So that's where, a good system comes in play. And, people plug in cables into their network because it's a dedicated road, right? It's dedicated bandwidth, and it's only those two devices talking together. So cables make a lot of sense to people. They go, okay, that makes a lot of sense. When you get to wireless, then it gets a little more complicated. So it's always important to think about, okay, how old is your home network? And there's a couple different pieces that, we'll kind of talk through, but that's really where investment needs to be made if you really want to make a difference. Forget about, the Ferraris, the new, iPhones, the new, Samsung phones, forget about those for a second. If you don't have good infrastructure, then you're not going to have a good experience. And that's what I've seen for my, IT experience that people keep calling me about. That's what I see the most common. So, and there's a couple other key areas too that people can look at to actually, think about when they have problems in their home. Is they like to blame the service provider that, that there's issues there in terms of it's not fast enough and everything else. But typically it has a lot to do with what your network and how old it is. And it's always good to upgrade for a couple of different reasons. So think about Wi-Fi. There's these new Wi-Fi standards that are out there. Wi-Fi 5, which is 802.11ac, and Wi-Fi 6, which is 802.11ax. To break it down, really all that means, there's a lot of different technical features and stuff. But back to my analogy of the roads, is now instead of having a dirt road in your house, now you have a 3-lane or 4-lane highway. And so now you're having a much better experience with your Ferrari as you're trying to get things done and race around and worry about those Zoom calls and everything else. It's working a lot better. And now you've got the right infrastructure in place where it makes a lot of sense in terms of buying a Ferrari. And all these Wi-Fi standards are doing is actually just increasing the number of roads and increasing the traffic, but also even putting dedicated roads to these different devices. So it's putting prioritization around these different things. So it's making the experience in terms of a lot better. So you'll see a lot of things in the press, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, even they're talking about Wi-Fi 7 now. And a lot of those things are just, continues to add more and more lanes for traffic. So things can go faster and faster. And not only can you go faster, but now you can get a lot more capacity through that. So, we talked last time about 8K and things like that. Yeah, all that stuff becomes possible. So now you've got a great road system through your house, right? But where are some of the other bottlenecks that create problems? Well, one of those bottlenecks can be, what's the level of service that you have going to your house? So think of it as like the on-ramp to a major superhighway. How big is that on-ramp going into your house? Well, that's where your service level comes with your service provider. Is it, do you have 100 megabits? Do you have 200 megabits, or even up to gig megabits? And actually, even we hear this year that a lot of the service providers are even thinking about, pushing that even more to even multi-gigabit service, which is awesome. So that's where you have to think about and actually have a discussion about, is it better to own that piece of equipment and go to retail and buy that? Or is it something that you actually have to get through your service provider? And it varies about where you're located and everything else. So checking out and making sure that you have, the latest there is really important.
It's funny because it's in a way we've really put consumers at an unfair advantage by building all of this great technology out, right? I mean, you can get gigabit internet speed at home. Do you really need it? Well, I mean, what are you doing with it, right? I mean, there has to be a level of understanding that, we talk about 8K video. Well, I can speak intelligently to 4K video and tell you that you need about 25 megabits per second per stream for that to function healthy. Well, does an average consumer know that? No, they just know that they want 4K, right? So you take all of these different variables and put them in there. And then you take a lockdown. I mean, if you want to find flaws in a network, give two kids either a tablet or a laptop, and you'll find every hole in your network immediately, right?
They will absolutely rip it apart and find out where the issues are.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. And coming from the Ruckus side, I've put a lot of Ruckus stuff in my house, but that's because I understand it and I know it to where I can set channel widths and set power levels and do things like that. But that's also a lesson learned from seeing what homeowners are really, the challenges they're really facing. So, it's one of those things. How do we educate them further to say, look, these are the things that you really need to understand without getting so grandly technical that you lose them?
Right. And this is where, one of the things that I find fascinating, because just being in this industry and just watching how people solve problems, is the phenomenon. What's happened a lot is actually people have separated the two issues in their home. And what I mean by that is they've separated the access. Is okay, that when I talked about that on ramp into the home, what's that device that they need? So they look at kind of a cable modem or a DSL modem, and they look at their service provider, for that device, or they get it retail. And as a separate thing, is they look at their home network in terms of the Wi-Fi piece of it. And some of the reasons for that is because Wi-Fi evolves fast in terms of a lot faster than maybe the on-ramp technology or DOCSIS or DSL. So we see a lot of people buying two separate devices to actually solve this problem. And I assume, Matt, this is actually probably something very similar that you did in your home, which is you have your access, and then you have your Ruckus, Wi-Fi access points throughout your home. So you solved the problem in terms of you needed really good infrastructure or really great roads throughout your house to get you the best experience. And we see that a lot in terms of how people are trying to solve that problem.
Well, I'm a helpless nerd. I mean, coming from an operations background and having worked in data centers and things like that, I mean, I'm not going to have cabled infrastructure in my house and not have that itch to go out and build a full-on network. So what I have in my house is not normal by any means at all.
Not at all.
But it's also good because we have really two different, avenues into this, right?
Yep.
So when we look at, the surfboard space and what we have there and the SB Max and things like that, we have that presence. And then we also have homeowners that have a Ruckus presence in there. So
absolutely,
it's extreme, especially being just on the education side and looking at, doing podcasts and doing live streams, having the arms and the ability to get that information out to people. Me personally, the way I look at it, I always look at things like this from the standpoint of where my parents would be, right? And I've talked about this on the podcast before, and I'll talk about it forever because I think it's hilarious. My mother has teased my dad for my entire life about having techno lust. He loves gadgets, right? He wants the gadgets. He wants all these things. And I get a lot of phone calls of, hey, this isn't working, right? So I look at that kind of from the approach of it. You need to put it in and it just needs to work. It needs to be seamless because not everybody is, a helpless nerd like myself where they want to go home and tinker around with a home network or have a home lab built or things like that. That doesn't exist in the broader spectrum of it, right? So one thing that I think, looking at the new technology that is out there with the surfboards and the Max technology, it answers that question, right? It provides that.
It does. I mean, one of the things that's, I find, and I do tinker with my network a lot too, which is, not normal. But one of the things I do in terms of when I do upgrades is if I do the upgrade, I let people know. And then if I don't hear anything, I know there's been success.
No news is good news.
No news is good news because but really it's you shouldn't have to sit there and say, or complain about, what's going on. I don't understand. It's the time of day, or there's multiple people on this. No, it should just work. And that's what ultimately consumers want. So the beauty in terms of, I think, the technology that we offer is, we offer a lot of different solutions for that access point or that on-ramp technology or DOCSIS modem. So many different speed levels, works with all the different service providers, from DOCSIS. So you can get anything from, very small internet connection up to, multi-gigabit connection. Just depends on the service that you provide. And then the second piece of that is we offer, a lot of different technology for the Wi-Fi. So we have a whole home mesh system that actually provides, basically a super highway, through your house, and actually has more than one unit. And those units are connected by a dedicated road, I'll call it, to blanket your house with Wi-Fi. So the power of that, though, is that there's no complaining anymore. There's no, there's the kids are fine. Everybody's doing, in terms of sessions, and it is what I have in my house. And I remember when my daughter's a teacher, my wife's a teacher, they were having multiple team sessions, going on with their students, all video, plus me, trying to work, phone calls and everything. My phone call even goes over Wi-Fi and no issues. That's really what you want in terms of a home. And it's very interesting in terms of watching people deal with, working from home and COVID and everything else, is that people see, I keep telling people, it's seriously stop thinking about the devices, think about the infrastructure in your house. Because if you focused on that first, I think you'll be much happier in terms of the devices that you have. And then also it makes more sense then to upgrade those devices. But that's where you got to start.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
The biggest impact.
Yeah, and it does. And that's a great point because, when we look at the infrastructure that you and I use when we go to work every day, right? There's servers out there and switches and everything else. Those aren't refreshed as often as people might think.
No.
When you spin up new environments, then you have new hardware that's installed. Home networks. Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, you make an excellent point when you talk about, when the home networks and how fast Wi-Fi advances, right? How quickly they're bringing new technology. Well, if I call my cable provider today, and say, hey, I want to upgrade my package could be 3 years old. I could have 3-year-old hardware sitting in my house where I'm basically, I'm sitting in a bottleneck because I don't have this newer technology that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And also too, it's not just from a performance perspective too. There's been significant advances in security. That's another big thing that people are concerned about too with their homes. So a lot of these different devices have much, much, much better security now because it's just the different technologies that's evolved. So not just for infrastructure of better Wi-Fi, but also protection of your network is something that's important. So that's also something that we, I know Ruckus, and I know from Era's standpoint, we actually pay a lot of attention to put that within our technology.
You talked about mesh, and I kind of want to dig into this a little bit because I think this is a very opportune time for education on it, right? When we talk to people in the Ruckus space, and I'm just talking about Ruckus, class access points, we strongly encourage them, if they can help it, to not mesh those devices over the air. The reason being is they currently don't have, they can do it, right? You reduce the capacity of that access point CPU when you do that. But what you do on the surfboard side with the Max solution, if you don't mind, go into some of the technical details, because I know you talked about it has a dedicated backhaul with it.
That's a great point. So, we talk about mesh technology is, one of the challenges, and I'll go back to my friend Steve, he's got his son upstairs in the, far bedroom. And, one of the challenges is that he doesn't have great coverage. So what a mesh system does is typically they're at least, 2 units, sometimes 3 units. We sell ours in a pair. And the first unit provides basically the router, or basically routing where the traffic needs to go. And in that first unit, it has 3 different radios. So One of the radios talks 2.4 gigahertz, and basically that's for old legacy, old Wi-Fi technology. And then there's a 5 gigahertz radio that speaks to a lot of the newer technologies out there, like 802.11ac, AX, 802.11a, and so it's actually compatible with, backward compatible with all the different Wi-Fi technologies out there. And then the last radio, and that's a tri-band technology. Why that's important is that radio speaks only to the second unit. So now the second unit is upstairs, and that unit also has 3 radios on it. So it has a dedicated pipe back and forth, or the dedicated road. Very high speed because it's dedicated, and it also large amounts of bandwidth flowing through there. But then it has the other 2 radios, so it can talk to those different devices. So in a sense, you've got, in the system, you got 4 different radios kind of blanketing your house, talking to all the different types of products. It's using the same SSID, so you can actually wander. It doesn't matter you're up in, the far bedroom or down, in the basement. You'll always be in range of kind of one of those radios and be able to go, think of it in terms of roaming, in terms of a mobile phone. That's much different than, some of the technology out there today of having just one single unit, maybe just in the office, and then hoping that it reaches that far bedroom. And that's what's growing a lot. That's what people have gravitated towards because, frankly, it's the best Wi-Fi coverage you can get.
Yeah, and meshing it so, the Jim Palmers of the world and Mo Williams and people like that and Trevor and Brian, like all these people can sit down and talk about carrier grade Wi-Fi until they're blue in the face and make me look like an absolute ditz. And I'm fine with that, right? So meshing is such a big thing because when we see typically Ruckus access points are meshed over the wire, right? And that's it's a performance thing. The access points at their inception were meant to be installed in large areas, right? Large office
the capacity.
Like yeah.
Think about the number of devices you're connected to too. That's just mind blowing.
Yeah. And when you sit down, so here's the thing. So going through the forums as much as I do and trying to help homeowners and people with issues, the one thing you run into is you actually find very technically savvy people involved with this more often than you would think.
Absolutely.
It's with anything, right? They don't have as much of a familiarity with the technology as they might with another one. They understand it. They just don't know how to navigate through it as much. If I was to sit there and walk into the non-technical savvy person's house, set up a laptop, put Wireshark on it, and show them how much traffic is actually happening between all of the different access points and the clients, their head would explode. So that's why when we put so much emphasis on meshing and why that dedicated backhaul is important to the performance, it's not just the radio backhaul that's in there. It's the CPUs and everything. I mean, there's so much that goes into it.
It's true.
Because it's just
actually, you bring up a really good point too. It's like, also the other thing that I tell people too is so if they upgraded the infrastructure, they've upgraded the access device, so now they've got good things. Then they need to start thinking about what's kind of the oldest Wi-Fi technology you have in your house, right? Because people have bought tons of different devices over the years, and some of those things sometimes can be a drag on your network, like that old, thermostat or that old, TV, and it's just they're very inefficient and actually can hurt your network because they're always broadcasting out information and it sucks up bandwidth. So those are also can be parasitic to your network.
Yeah,
and those are the ones you need to target and say, you know what, I need to upgrade those different devices.
So public service announcement. If you can look at all of the wireless devices you have in your house and you find one thing that is 802.11b, do everything within your power to get rid of it.
That is awesome advice. Absolutely.
I mean, it's on the home side for the Ruckus piece. We've actually talked to people about ensuring they don't have B devices and then adjusting BSS min rates. Because the other thing is, looking at it on the surface and not understanding how Wi-Fi works very well, people might think that when my client attaches to an access point over here in this room, and then I go downstairs and the access point's going to tell that client to connect to the one in the basement. No, that is not correct at all. The clients make those decisions. Yep. So then it becomes even more, and that's where we're consumers, a portion of, I'm not going to put everybody in the same bucket, are at that disadvantage because like I said, they just want it to work. They don't necessarily care all the inner workings of it, right? I don't need to know that. I just need to know that Netflix works, that my kids can do their homework, that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
So,
but it's also good to kind of, that's why I kind of use my road analogy to break it down to something that people go, okay, I can understand that piece of it. So now I understand why I got to go upgrade. So,
yeah.
But let's talk for a second about some of the new things coming. So we talk about Wi-Fi 802.11ax, which is a new standard. It's been out for a couple of years. That's where you see Wi-Fi 6. Then there's this new standard called Wi-Fi 6E, and this is where it gets very confusing for consumers. Is now you're talking about the 6 gigahertz band, right? So this is new spectrum or new wireless that the government just recently allowed now for consumer devices. So all the different radios of past Wi-Fi technology talk either 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, and all that spectrum there's a lot of traffic. And as you talked about Wireshark, and you can actually see all that traffic, and it's out there. And I'm sure people have noticed that they can potentially even see their neighbors' access points, from on their phones and stuff like that. Well, all that is becoming basically noise pollution. Well, not noise pollution, but spectrum pollution.
Yeah.
And what the 6E standard now does is it opens a brand new spectrum. So it's clean. So it's going to be an exciting time, as we move into the next year is now new devices will be able to come out that'll have access to this new spectrum and be able to function even much, much better. So when I talked about that dedicated road, between the mesh devices, now it can be moved not only to a dedicated road, but now something that's free of all this interference. Your Wi-Fi networks are just going to get better. Mm-hmm. So that's a first exciting step. And then the second one is, Wi-Fi 7. So Wi-Fi 7 is a new standard, still, a little ways away in that. Maybe start seeing some silicon by the end of this year. So probably we'll see it maybe the end of 2022 in terms of retail, which is good. Lots of great things planned there. I don't remember all the different technical changes going off in Wi-Fi 7, but as you can see, as people's problems come up, there's a lot of people working on the standards to actually incorporate this. I hate to say it, but one of the exciting things about COVID, if there's other than me getting out of my basement eventually, is some of the advancements in terms of Wi-Fi, because it's shown people that there's actual real problems that need to be solved, and it's brought some of those issues really in light. So having those technical problems and eventually get into a product, that's what's exciting to me. That's what I love about the industry and love about the technology itself.
Talking about 6E and 7 and things like that, on the consumer side, at what point do you make a determination that we just have to abandon support for older technology, right? Like, at what point do you say, B, it's dead, we no longer support it? Like, how do you get to that point where you're able to make that? Yeah.
That's a really tough one, because, in retail, it also, its reality is a lot of some of the newer technologies, they're expensive, right? It's latest chip technology, it's expensive. And so over time, some of that technology gets cost reduced and it becomes a lot more cost effective. So today, our portfolio, we still have Wi-Fi 5, products that we sell today because they are able to hit lower price points. So we try to make it so we blanket a bunch of different price points for consumers as well, because we know not everybody wants to split the device, have a modem and a Wi-Fi mesh system because of the expense of that. Well, there are other more cost-effective solutions that still will get you great Wi-Fi performance and still solve some of the same problems that I've mentioned. But they may use Wi-Fi 5 technology versus Wi-Fi 6 technology.
Yeah.
I noticed that, Matt, it's funny you mentioned about 802.11, 802.11b, right? So there's also 802.11n, and up to last year, I still saw 802.11n products in retail. So not from our portfolio, but there was others in terms of selling those products still. And that technology is is very old. It's very cheap, but it's very old. So that's how I'd caution consumers is that you got to look at what technology is in there, and you'll find that probably the cheapest Wi-Fi ones will be some of that older technology that, frankly, it's going to have its issues.
Yeah, you look at home security systems like doorbells and cameras and things like that are running at 2.4, and I have one. I've had issues with it here and there, and I feel sorry for the poor person on the other end of the phone with tech support when I call them because they want to run through their script about speed tests and this and that. And I'm like, all right, man, let me explain this to you very quickly. We can skip all of that.
Skip all of that.
Yeah, trust me. We have Wi-Fi coverage. There's a problem with your product.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, I would imagine that when we look at, because even on the enterprise side or service provider or whatever, network and cloud, however we want to coin it, support, like you said, supporting those older technologies is very cost effective, and it makes sense up until it becomes a detriment to what's being further developed, right? So if I'm running into a roadblock with trying to bring Wi-Fi 6E technology in because I'm having to support something older, then at that point you have to do it and package it with, hey, this will support all of this, but not this, right? I mean, those determinations can come in there. And, it's one of those things where people still run Windows Server 2012. I mean, sometimes things just, like when I talked about how often things are refreshed in networks, not as often as you would think at all, for the same reason. It's expensive. I mean, it costs a lot of money to do that stuff, It
does. It does. It's always difficult to figure out in terms of when's the right time to move on from older technologies to new ones. But sometimes it is the best things to do for consumers too, is to keep pushing to go to the next standard, because there are really big advantages. And I can't stress enough to people that I don't think people pay attention enough to the Wi-Fi infrastructure and within their own home and how much they do need to upgrade, because there's been so many great things that have happened over the past, just 5 years that people should consider. So when they're buying their brand new 8K TVs and their new screaming laptops and all these different devices, that's awesome. But if you really want to get the good experience out of them, you got to make sure your infrastructure is upgraded.
Yeah,
you really do.
Absolutely. And that's the definite takeaway from it is even if you think that your home network is 3 years old, 5 years old, a year old, whatever, and you think it's running along just fine, new devices come into that network more often than you would see in other environments, right? I mean, like you said, your streaming demands, and one thing that people don't necessarily pay attention to is what your upload demands are either. So that's a big one, right?
Yeah, actually, that's a great one, because now with all the video calls and stuff like that going on now, it's like that wasn't as common. That really was not as common, a year ago. But now everybody's doing that, and so that's an important thing too. You got to consider. Yeah,
my youngest, he likes to stream on Twitch, and you want to look at upload traffic. Holy moly!
How much? Actually, I don't even know how much bandwidth does Twitch take?
Not a lot.
From a upload piece of it. I guess it depends on if he's uploading videos of himself in terms of his gameplay and stuff. But wow,
it's pretty light overall. The codecs are built in pretty well. Typically you're streaming up at 720p anyways, and then they'll up-rev it on their side if they want. It's not as heavy as you would think. I mean, especially if you look at a network where, hey, I have gig down, but 40 meg up, you'll be just fine, right? Now, if you need to push large files to a cloud environment from work, then that might be, or from home to a work environment, that might be a little bit slower, but it seems to function pretty well. I don't see any headaches with. I'll put it this way: I haven't gotten to a point to where I need to limit their bandwidth. You know what I mean? Like it hasn't just swallowed everything.
You haven't decided to do the parental control and just kind of shut them off.
Well, so like I talked about earlier, I have kind of a pretty nerdy setup. So I do run pfSense at home, which is an awesome firewall, and it's great for home use. And there's reasons for that. Pre-COVID, traveling as much as I did, there were times where if I'm on public Wi-Fi and I need to jump on and pay a bill or check my bank account or whatever, I'm not doing that on a public Wi-Fi system. So I'll VPN to the house and do it. Or if I'm in a different country and I can't pull certain Netflix content or whatever, I'll VPN home so I can watch it. I mean, you're on the road. You have downtime, right? You need to do something in the room at night. So having that ability, but I also run things like PF Blocker and things like that. So it filters, because one thing I've learned is that an 11-year-old, when a little link pops up in front of them, they don't think about, should I click on that? They just click on it. Yeah. Yes. So I've cleaned a couple messes up and finally said, nope, enough. So I've got all of that filtered. Just makes it easier.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Plus protect them a little bit. I mean, a buddy of mine asked me, he goes, you gonna run anything just for filtering? And I was like, no. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. How many things did you find on the internet as a kid that you shouldn't have? And I was like, I'm going to go set it up right now.
Like, oh yeah, I better do something.
Yeah.
About that.
Like,
Yeah.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah. And so that's also some of the things that we think about too when we're talking about. I know we spend a lot of time talking about Wi-Fi, but within some of our products, the Max systems we have today, which is we call Surfboard Central, which is an app that actually helps in terms of onboard the system, make it easy for consumers, but then also becomes a platform to actually start to offer consumers more help with their network, so they can learn more about what's going on, start to do parental controls, have better security. We think that's really important, because it's not just about, we talked a lot about just having great Wi-Fi and having it just work, but there's a lot more things that people can do with their networks and solve some of the problems you just mentioned. So that's another area that we're spending a lot of time on. So Surfboard Central is kind of our answer for that, to go do that. So another big area for us this year. Yeah,
that's a huge feature. And it's also something that, I don't know, when I look, it's so appreciated because, look, the internet is not censored, right? Nor should it be. So if you're, strongly against a child listening to music with profanity in it, it's not the internet's job to filter that. It becomes your job as a parent and a caregiver to filter that, right? And take care of that. And that's where I'm not trying to turn this into a political thing. Well, I'm going to do it anyways. I'll tell you a quick story. So I was probably in my 20s, and there was a show that was on FX called The Shield, and it was probably my favorite show in the entire world. I love that show.
I'm sorry, what's the rating on this? I just want to know for this podcast, what's the rating?
This one we'll keep it PG-13.
Okay, all right, okay. I just want to just checking. All right, okay, go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And The Shield was it was a show. It was a cop show, right? And it's just dirty cops doing whatever. But there was no nudity, there was no swearing, there was no nothing, right? There was nothing off color. And I got into a bit of a tiff with the Parents Television Coalition, and I think it was one person with it, because they wanted the show pulled. And my brain's saying, that makes zero sense to me. First of all, the show's on at 11 o'clock at night. If your kids are still up at 11 o'clock at night, that does not make it a network problem. That makes it a parent problem kind of thing, right? So I've always kind of taken that same correlation back to the internet, right? I mean, we have built tools into products now that allow you to filter that content so that you can keep them protected from certain things, right?
Yep.
And I think that it's a very noble thing, because when you look at it, at the end of the day, we're not just, a bunch of overly technical people that love to build all this technology. We're also parents and friends and,
yes,
children of somebody. So there's a compassionate human level there that exists that I think becomes really important. It's not a money grab. It's we are going to give you this sense of security that you can put this in there and build it. And you don't have to say thank you or appreciate it. Just know that it's there. It's there for you.
Oh yeah. I mean, great point. I mean, we're all, I'm a parent myself. I've got, 2 kids and, so it's not just from my perspective in terms of things I see within my home, but also, as I mentioned, I get the IT calls too from my friends and neighbors and stuff like that. So I do listen about, how people the challenges that they face, and how do we build better products? Because that's what makes me excited is how do you build better products that, people can rely on every day? And that's what makes me really excited about this industry, and why I like my job so much, is because I get the opportunity to do that. And I know you feel the same way, Matt. I know you take the products and things that you guys build very seriously, and think about how do we make them better? How do we make consumers' lives easier, and how they get better, better experience overall? So That's fun.
Yeah, it really is. And okay, so I want to ask you about this, and then I'm really curious. So when I look at how products are, when features are developed or products are developed or functions of those are developed, for the Ruckus side, it's usually driven by a couple of things. We either see an RFE that comes in, which is a request for enhancement.
Yep.
Or we have a defect, right? Or it's just, somebody has found something that like, hey, this isn't functioning right, or we develop around that, right? But we have a very large bucket of information to look at and pick from when we look at doing that. On the consumer side, I'm gonna just take a stab and guess that that bucket or that sample size of that data that you can pick from probably isn't as large. So when you look at how to develop and maybe it is, I don't know. I'm not trying to speak for you. So
no, that's fine. There's actually a couple different things you look at. So one is, obviously we have technical support, for consumers when they call in. So we get a lot of information in terms of trying to understand a little bit more about how are consumers using the products and frankly some of the problems they have. That's one big data source. The other one is I've got a really talented staff of some really good product managers who try to think and look at some of the marketing data that's out there about what's happening in technology and where are the kind of the current trends that people are need some help in for these things. So we've got active projects underway to go after and solve some of these problems, stuff I can't really talk about right now. Love to in the future, Matt.
And we will.
But there's some things that that are pretty interesting that we believe are going to be pretty impactful. And then the last place is obviously we get a lot of feedback in terms of online and through other ways of people using the products that we try to improve upon. So there's a lot of information out there. And then the last place I could think of is great thing is within this company is we have some amazing, really creative people that understand a lot about technology, and they look not just from 1 year out, they look 3 years out and 4 years out about what some of those trends are, and how do we take advantage of some of those trends to really create new experiences. And that's what's exciting. It's taking a look at all those different data sources and then saying, all right, this is what the new product should have in it, and this is what the top categories of things that we need from a feature set. What's it look like? Everything from even how it operates from an app perspective. So a lot goes into in terms of trying to develop a new product.
I think if I could tell anybody anything, it would be we're very, very fortunate in this, whether it's pre, during, or post-COVID. I think there's a level of fortunate. We're just fortunate as consumers because there are people like yourself and people on your teams that have a real passion for this stuff, that want to make sure that the best product is out there, the best experience is out there. And I think it's just something that I'll say it for everybody. Thank you. Because if it wasn't for people like yourself and your teams, this stuff would drag and it wouldn't be done the way it is. So just seeing and hearing the passion that you have for it and seeing the passion that goes into it from your team, I think it's very much needed to be told thank you, because you make it what it is.
Well, Matt, I really appreciate that. But I've got a lot of amazing people on my team that really think about this hard every day in terms of how we make the best product. So it makes my job pretty easy in terms of got such a great team that helps make great products. So
yeah,
appreciate that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you bet. So you're going to throw these little teasers out there. There's things that I can't talk about yet. So all you're basically doing is forcing yourself into coming back and having to record again. So now you're screwed.
Well, yes, I know, but maybe I'll truly actually be able to do it outside of my house, at some other location, maybe for our next podcast. So
I'm
that would be phenomenal.
That one might be at the kitchen table. No, I'm just kidding.
God, I hope not.
Well, Evan, I know you're a very busy individual, so I can't thank you enough for doing this and getting this information out there. And like I said, the key takeaway is, even if you don't think you need it, go upgrade your network, because you're going to be bringing new devices in. The technology is outstanding. I think it speaks for itself, and you'll see improvements that you didn't even realize once you have it installed and running.
Family harmony.
Absolutely.
It'll definitely improve.
Yep, absolutely. You got it. Evan,
All
thank
right.
you so much. I really
Matt, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. All right, thanks. See you.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Ruckcast. If you just found us for the first time, be sure to follow or subscribe on your platform of choice so you can be notified of future episodes. If you have ideas for future episodes or can't find Ruckcast on your favorite platform, contact us at ruckcast@comscope.com. And as always, thanks for listening.